Have you ever wondered how long a war can last? Not just the battles, but the simmering tensions, the unending skirmishes, and the decades, sometimes centuries of conflict? Today, we're diving into history's longest wars, where peace was a distant dream and the struggle dragged on for generations. We'll start with the shorter ones, if you can call decades of conflict short, and work our way to the longest war in human history. Stay with us till the end. You won't believe how long the final war lasted. The Anglo-Zulu War, 1879. In 1879, the British Empire went to war with the Zulu Kingdom in what is known as the Anglo-Zulu War. Although this conflict lasted only a year, it was part of a broader struggle that included decades of tension and smaller skirmishes. The war is famous for the Battle of Isandlwana, where the Zulus delivered a stunning defeat to the British. However, the British regrouped and eventually defeated the Zulus at the Battle of Ulundi, leading to the annexation of the Zulu Kingdom. The war marked the end of the Zulu Kingdom as an independent power in southern Africa and was part of the broader British imperial expansion in the region. The Malayan Emergency, 1948 to 1960. The Malayan Emergency, lasting from 1948 to 1960, was a guerrilla war fought between the British Commonwealth Forces and the Malayan National Liberation Army, MNLA, the military arm of the Malayan Communist Party. The conflict began as a fight against British colonial rule, but evolved into a broader anti-communist campaign. The British implemented a successful counter-insurgency strategy that involved cutting off support for the MNLA from local populations and resettling rural communities in fortified villages. The emergency officially ended in 1960, but the MNLA continued to pose a threat for several more years. The conflict was one of the first major counterinsurgency campaigns of the Cold War and had a lasting impact on British military strategy. The Vietnam War, 1955 to 1975. The Vietnam War, one of the most controversial conflicts of the 20th century, lasted for 20 years, from 1955 to 1975. It was a war that pitted the communist government of North Vietnam, supported by its communist allies, against South Vietnam and its principal ally, the United States. The war was brutal and intense, characterized by guerrilla warfare, massive bombing campaigns, and significant civilian casualties. The Tet Offensive in 1968 was a turning point, with North Vietnamese forces launching a surprise attack during the Vietnamese New Year, leading to a shift in American public opinion against the war. The Vietnam War ended with the fall of Saigon in 1975, leading to the reunification of Vietnam under communist control. The war had a profound impact on both Vietnam and the United States, leaving a legacy of bitterness, trauma, and a deeply divided American society. The 30 Years' War, 1608 to 1648. Moving on, we come to the 30 Years' War, a conflict that devastated Central Europe for 3 decades. Starting in 1618, the war was initially a religious conflict between Catholic and Protestant states in the Holy Roman Empire. However, it quickly spiraled into a more general struggle for power, drawing in most of the major European powers. The war is infamous for the widespread destruction it caused, with entire towns and villages being destroyed, famine, and disease claiming more lives than the battles themselves. The Treaty of Westphalia in 1648 finally brought an end to the conflict, leading to significant changes in the political landscape of Europe, including the recognition of state sovereignty and the decline of the Holy Roman Empire. The 30 Years' War is often cited as one of the longest and most destructive conflicts in European history, leaving a legacy that influenced the course of European history for centuries to come. The War of the Roses, 1455 to 1487. The War of the Roses, fought between the houses of Lancaster and York, was a series of dynastic conflicts that plagued England for 32 years. The war was essentially a power struggle for the English throne, with both sides claiming legitimacy. The war saw several major battles, including the Battle of Toten in 1461, which was one of the bloodiest battles ever fought on English soil. The conflict finally ended with the rise of the Tudor dynasty when Henry VII, a Lancastrian, defeated Richard III at the Battle of Bosworth Field in 1485. The War of the Roses significantly weakened the English nobility and paved the way for the strong centralized rule of the Tudors, marking the end of the medieval period in England. The Guatemalan Civil War, 1960 to 1996. Next on our list is the Guatemalan Civil War, a conflict that lasted for 36 years. It was one of the bloodiest civil wars in Latin American history, with over 200,000 people killed or disappeared. The war began as a clash between leftist guerrilla groups and the Guatemalan government, but it was fueled by deep-rooted social inequalities and Cold War politics. The conflict was marked by brutal military repression, including mass killings, torture, and forced disappearances. Indigenous communities were particularly targeted, with entire villages being wiped out in what many consider acts of genocide. The war finally ended in 1996 with the signing of peace accords, but the scars of the conflict remain. The war left deep divisions in Guatemalan society and highlighted the devastating impact of prolonged internal conflicts. The Korean War, 1950 to present. The Korean War, which began in 1950, is technically still ongoing, making it one of the longest conflicts in modern history. The war started when North Korea, backed by China and the Soviet Union, invaded South Korea. The United States and other United Nations members intervened on behalf of South Korea. The war saw brutal fighting, with millions of soldiers and civilians killed. The conflict reached a stalemate by 1953, leading to an armistice but no formal peace treaty. As a result, the Korean peninsula remains divided to this day, with North and South Korea technically still at war. The Korean War had significant geopolitical implications, solidifying the division of Korea and contributing to the ongoing tension and instability in the region. The 80 Years' War, 1568 to 1648. The Iberian Union and the Dutch Revolt, also known as the 80 Years' War, was a protracted conflict that lasted for over 80 years, from 1568 to 1648. The war was driven by the Dutch struggle for independence from the Spanish Habsburgs, who sought to maintain control over the wealthy and strategically important provinces of the Netherlands. The conflict was marked by a series of battles, sieges, and naval engagements, with both sides experiencing periods of victory and defeat. The war finally ended with the signing of the Treaty of Westphalia in 1648, which recognized the independence of the Dutch Republic and marked the end of Spanish dominance in the region. The 80 Years' War had a profound impact on the development of the Dutch Republic, laying the foundation for its golden age in the 17th century and shaping the future of European politics. The 100 Years' War, 1337 to 1453. Next on our journey is a war that, despite its name, didn't last exactly 100 years, but spanned a staggering 116 years. The 100 Years' War was a series of conflicts fought between England and France, primarily over claims to the French throne. It all started when King Edward III of England claimed the French crown after the French king died without a male heir. The war saw legendary battles like the Battle of Agincourt in 1415, where the English archers decimated French knights, and the rise of iconic figures such as Joan of Arc, who inspired the French to turn the tide. The war eventually ended with the French reclaiming their lands and England retreating across the Channel, leaving behind a fractured and war-torn France. Despite the long duration, the war wasn't continuous, but rather a series of conflicts punctuated by periods of uneasy peace. The 100 Years' War shaped the future of both nations, leading to the decline of feudalism and the rise of strong, centralized monarchies. The Punic Wars, 264 to 46 BC. The Punic Wars were a series of 3 wars fought between the Roman Republic and the Carthaginian Empire, lasting over a century from 264 BCE to 146 BCE. The wars were driven by the struggle for dominance in the Mediterranean region, with both Rome and Carthage seeking to expand their territories and influence. The First Punic War was fought over control of Sicily, while the Second Punic War saw the famous Carthaginian general Hannibal invade Italy and win several stunning victories against the Romans. The Third Punic War ended with the complete destruction of Carthage in 146 BCE, marking the end of the Carthaginian Empire and the beginning of Roman dominance in the Mediterranean. The Punic Wars had a profound impact on the development of the Roman Republic, leading to its expansion into a vast empire and the eventual decline of the Carthaginian civilization. The Australian Frontier Wars, 1788 to 1934. The Australian Frontier Wars were a series of conflicts between Indigenous Australians and European settlers that lasted for over 140 years, from the arrival of the First Fleet in 1788 to the last recorded skirmishes in the 1930s. The wars were driven by the European expansion into Indigenous lands and the resistance of Indigenous Australians to the encroachment on their territories. The conflict saw a series of battles, skirmishes, and massacres, with both sides suffering heavy losses. The wars had a profound impact on the development of Australia, leading to the dispossession and displacement of Indigenous Australians and the establishment of European dominance in the region. The Byzantine-Ottoman Wars, 1265 to 1453. The Byzantine-Ottoman Wars were a series of conflicts between the Byzantine Empire and the rising Ottoman Empire that lasted for nearly 2 centuries, from the mid-13th century until the fall of Constantinople in 1453. The wars began with the gradual encroachment of the Ottoman Turks into Byzantine territory, leading to a series of battles and sieges. The Byzantine Empire, weakened by internal strife and external threats, struggled to defend its remaining territories. The conflict culminated in the fall of Constantinople in 1453, marking the end of the Byzantine Empire and the beginning of the Ottoman Empire's dominance in the region. The fall of Constantinople also had a profound impact on European history, leading to the end of the Middle Ages and the beginning of the Renaissance. The Crusades, 1096 to 1291. The Crusades were a series of religious wars between Christians and Muslims, initiated by the Latin Church in the medieval period. They lasted for almost 200 years, beginning with the First Crusade in 1096 and ending with the fall of the last Christian stronghold in the Holy Land, Acre, in 1291. The Crusades were driven by religious fervor, political ambition, and the desire for economic gain. They had a profound impact on the medieval world, leading to the establishment of Crusader states in the Middle East, the growth of the European economy, and increased cultural exchanges between Europe and the Islamic world. The Crusades also left a legacy of animosity and mistrust between Christians and Muslims that echoes into the present day. The Ottoman-Habsburg Wars, 1526 to 1791. The Ottoman-Habsburg Wars were a series of conflicts between the Ottoman Empire and the Habsburg dynasty that lasted for over 250 years, from the early 16th century to the late 18th century. The wars were driven by the struggle for dominance in Central Europe, with the Ottomans seeking to expand their empire into the heart of Europe, and the Habsburgs seeking to defend their territories and push back the Ottoman advance. The conflict saw several major battles, including the Siege of Vienna in 1683, where the Ottomans were decisively defeated by a coalition of European forces. The wars finally ended with the Treaty of Sistova in 1791, marking the end of Ottoman expansion into Europe and the beginning of the decline of the Ottoman Empire. The Arauco War, 1536 to 1818. The Arauco War was a long and brutal conflict between the Spanish Empire and the Mapuche people of present-day Chile. The war began in 1536 with the Spanish conquest of Chile and lasted for almost 300 years, ending with Chile's independence from Spain in 1818. The war was characterized by a series of brutal campaigns, uprisings, and peace treaties that were often broken. The Mapuche, known for their fierce resistance, managed to maintain a degree of independence throughout much of the conflict. The Spanish, despite their superior weaponry and resources, struggled to subdue the Mapuche, who employed guerrilla tactics and used the rugged terrain to their advantage. The Arauco War saw the rise of legendary Mapuche leaders such as Lautaro and Caupoli Khan, who became symbols of resistance against Spanish colonialism. The conflict officially ended with Chile's independence in 1818, but the legacy of the war continued to influence Chilean society, particularly in the treatment and rights of the indigenous Mapuche people. The Anglo-Scottish Wars, 1296–1603. The Anglo-Scottish Wars were a series of conflicts between the Kingdom of England and the Kingdom of Scotland that lasted for over 300 years, from the late 13th century to the early 17th century. The wars began with the Wars of Scottish Independence, where figures like William Wallace and Robert the Bruce fought for Scotland's freedom from English rule. The conflicts were marked by brutal battles, sieges, and political intrigue, with both sides suffering heavy losses. The wars finally came to an end with the union of the crowns in 1603, when James VI of Scotland became James I of England, uniting the two kingdoms under a single monarch. The union marked the end of centuries of warfare between England and Scotland, paving the way for the eventual formation of the United Kingdom. The Arab-Byzantine Wars, 629 to 1050. The Arab-Byzantine Wars were a series of conflicts between the Byzantine Empire and various Arab caliphates that lasted for over 400 years, from the early 7th century to the mid-11th century. The wars began with the rapid expansion of the Islamic Caliphate under the Rashidun and Umayyad caliphs, who launched a series of invasions into Byzantine territory. The Byzantines, despite their military prowess, struggled to hold back the Arab forces, losing vast territories in the Middle East, North Africa, and the Mediterranean. The conflict was characterized by a series of sieges, naval battles, and border skirmishes, with both sides experiencing periods of victory and defeat. The wars finally ended in the mid-11th century with the decline of the Abbasid Caliphate and the rise of the Seljuk Turks, leading to a new phase of conflict in the region. The Roman-Persian Wars, 92 BC to 629 AD. The Roman-Persian Wars were a series of conflicts between the Roman Empire and the Persian empires of Parthia and Sassanid Persia, lasting for over 700 years from 92 BC to 629 AD. The wars were driven by the struggle for dominance in the Middle East, with both empires seeking to expand their territories and influence in the region. The conflict saw several major battles and sieges, with both sides experiencing periods of victory and defeat. The wars finally ended in the early 7th century with the rise of the Islamic Caliphate, which rapidly conquered both the Roman and Persian territories in the Middle East, marking the end of centuries of conflict between the two empires. The Anglo-French Wars, 1066 to 1815. The series of conflicts between England and France, often referred to collectively as the Anglo-French Wars, spanned nearly 750 years, starting with the Norman conquest of England in 1066 and ending with the defeat of Napoleon at the Battle of Waterloo in 1815. These wars included the Hundred Years' War, the various Anglo-French Wars during the reigns of the Plantagenet and Tudor monarchs, and the Napoleonic Wars. The conflicts were driven by a combination of territorial disputes, dynastic claims, and national rivalry. The wars had a profound impact on both nations, shaping their histories, cultures, and national identities. The defeat of Napoleon and the end of the Napoleonic Wars marked the end of centuries of conflict between England and France, leading to a period of relative peace and the beginning of the modern era in European history. The longest war in history, the Reconquista, 711–1492. And finally, we come to the longest war in history, the Reconquista, which lasted nearly 800 years. The Iberian Religious Wars, also known as the Christian-Muslim conflicts on the Iberian Peninsula, lasted for nearly 800 years, from the early 8th century until the completion of the Reconquista in 1492. The conflict began with the Muslim conquest of the Iberian Peninsula in 711 and the establishment of the Umayyad Caliphate in Al-Andalus. The Christian kingdoms in the north of the peninsula launched a series of military campaigns to reclaim the territory, leading to centuries of warfare. The Reconquista was not a single, continuous war, but rather a series of campaigns, battles, and political maneuvers that saw the Christian kingdoms gradually push back Muslim rule in Spain. It culminated in 1492 with the fall of Granada, the last Muslim stronghold, and the unification of Spain under Catholic monarchs Ferdinand and Isabella. The Reconquista profoundly shaped the cultural, religious, and political landscape of Spain and had a lasting impact on European history, setting the stage for the Spanish Empire's rise and the Age of Exploration. From the lightning-fast Anglo-Zanzibar War to the centuries-long Reconquista, the history of warfare is as varied as it is complex. These conflicts have shaped nations, influenced cultures, and changed the course of history. While the reasons for war are as diverse as the wars themselves, the impact of these struggles resonates through time, reminding us of the delicate balance between conflict and peace. As we contemplate these epic struggles, it is essential to remember the human toll. Behind every statistic and battle lies the suffering of individuals and families. Thank you for joining us on this journey through history's longest wars. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, share it with others who love history, and don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into the past.